Washington, and it becomes very noticeable also with the way, with the facts and how we campaign against the so I someone that I have a lot of respect for him, and he is very young and have a very long story. Very young, so there is he's a businessman. He is a politician and someone that is really close to the people and to the issues that brought us here today. So without any delay, I will introduce to you Beto.
Muy buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
How is everybody doing?
Great.
Thank you all for greeting us. Thank you all for what you're doing right now, especially for those people and those children who have no voice, who fear that they're not being heard, who are strangers in a strange land, a place where they do not speak the language, in many cases imprisoned, though they've committed no crime, and having no idea when or even if they will see their parents or their family again. And that is happening right now in this country. In an effort to understand why any human being would make a more than 2,000-mile journey from the Central Triangle countries of Central America, the Northern Triangle countries of Central America, we went to Ciudad Juarez, our sister city, right across the river from El Paso, Texas, and went to Casa del Migrante to meet some of these asylum seekers and refugees after they had made this journey. And we met this one young family, a mother and a father and a 3 or 4-year-old child. And they told us about making that 2,000-mile journey from El Salvador and why they made it in the first place. The father had shown up to work that morning, 5:30 a.m., as he does every day, hard-working person trying to provide for himself and for his family. There he is met by gang members who tell him that they know who his wife is and who his child is, and that they will kill them unless he produces the money that they are requesting. He doesn't have the funds. He goes to the police department. The police tell him he had better get out of town, leave the country, and make his way for America. So doing what any human being would do, given the same set of conditions, what Amy, my wife, and I would do if it were the only way to save our kids, that family made that journey by foot, sometimes in a bus, sometimes atop, not inside of a train known as the Beast or La Bestia, coming to this country. But before they arrived at the U.S.-Mexico border, the father told me about crossing 6 hours of the Chihuahuan Desert in the middle of one of the hottest summers on record, where temperatures can get up to 110 degrees. His child on his shoulders in the company of other asylum seekers, one of whom died from exhaustion and thirst and exposure to the elements. And the father told me, I did not know what to do. I just cried, I prayed to God, and then we continued. Along the way, losing one of the shoes off of his feet and talking about how hot that sun was off of the sand on his feet, how hot it was on the back of his neck, but he was going to be focused on getting his family to safety and to salvation. They make it here to the United States of America, cross the Rio Grande River, turn themselves into, do not try to flee from the Border Patrol agents who are waiting there for them, try to follow our laws, claim asylum according to the U.S. Code, are taken to a Border Patrol station where they are kept inside a cinder block cell, sleeping on concrete floors under aluminum blankets in what he referred to as an ice box. Imagine going from the hottest temperatures you can imagine, which will kill you, and then going into one of the coldest places you can ever be in, with your kid, not knowing what's going to happen. And in their case, after 3 days, they were returned to the country of Mexico under a new cruel policy of this administration that's called Remain in Place or Remain in Mexico, where they are prey to those who will take advantage of the fact that they do not have a dime in their pockets. They're not from the country of Mexico in the first place and are so easy to exploit. But we also know that there are some families and some children in particular who are apprehended and then are detained indefinitely. They're detained in places like Homestead in Florida, where there are 2,600 children being kept in military-style camps. We were able to go there and peer over the wall and see those kids walking in single file lines. And what we are told by those who've been able to get out of Homestead is you are not allowed to have any kind of human contact with the other children who are there, even your brother or your sister. Imagine the torture, the long-term damage that we are doing to these families. In Clint, Texas, just outside of my hometown of El Paso, there's a Border Patrol station that has kept thousands of children in these cinder block cells, toddlers as young as 5 months old, without diapers. Which means they are shitting themselves, they're shitting on the floor that they will sleep on that night. Kids a little bit older than them taking care of those toddlers to whom they have no relation whatsoever. Our government not providing toothbrushes or toothpaste or soap or a change of clothes for kids who sleep in their filth and the filth of other kids every single night in the wealthiest, the most powerful country on the face of the planet and in the whole of human history. That is what we are doing at this moment. And in fact, when you add up all of those children and all of the Border Patrol stations and all of the detention centers all across this country, you have the largest mass incarceration of children who have not committed a crime since the mass internment of Japanese Americans in the Second World War. And to a person, I bet we all believe that if we were alive and in a position to do something at the time in the 1940s, we would have stood up and against that injustice to make sure that based on their race and their ethnicity, we did not visit this injustice and cruelty on our fellow human beings. I bet we would have done the same thing had we learned about the passengers of the St. Louis, who in 1939 set sail from Hamburg, Germany, more than 950 Jewish refugees aboard, children, women, and men who were turned away from the shores of this country, sent back across the Atlantic, and more than 250 of them would be murdered in the Holocaust. Children, women, and men. And though that was the decision of one man, Franklin Delano Roosevelt at the time, in a democracy, in a government of, by, and for the people, those decisions and what is happening right now rests on the shoulders of every single one of us until we do all that we can to make it right. Here's how we do it. Your willingness to be here tonight, to join in others all across this country who have the courage of their convictions, good people of good conscience throughout the United States. This forms the political will, the pressure necessary to get those representatives in Congress and ultimately the person in the White House to reflect our urgency and our will on this issue. When we learned that children more than a year ago were being separated from their parents and housed in a tent camp in Tornillo, Texas, just outside of El Paso, we all went there to hold vigil, to bear witness, to testify back to our fellow Americans about what was being done in our name. And within nearly 6 months, that camp was closed down. We no longer had a practice of family separation or a zero-tolerance policy in the United States of America. All of us, together at this moment, need to do all that we can for those kids, for their families, to make sure that not only do we stop these practices, but that we spare no expense in reuniting every single family that has been separated, in being there for those families and for those kids for the long term, because I have been there when they have been reunited. An 8-year-old child who has not seen her mother for months looks nothing like my 8-year-old son when he hasn't seen me for months. There's no big smile on his face, no impatience to tell their mother what they've experienced, no tears of joy rolling down their cheeks. There is nothing on that face whatsoever, an inability to connect with the person with whom you associate the greatest pain you have ever felt, perhaps the greatest pain any child could ever feel. So let's do right by those kids. Let's do right by our conscience. Let's do right by this country. Let's make sure that we not only end the practice of family separation, we not only reunite those families, but we rewrite this country's immigration laws in our own image, following our own values, in the best traditions of the United States of America.
Thank you. Wow.
I'm confident that this moment of greatest peril, especially for those kids, is going to produce the moment of greatest promise for this country. But it is up to every single one of us to ensure that we do this. So I ask you, please keep up this fight. Please continue to gather. Please continue to speak out and to speak up and to reach out to those who are in positions of public trust to make sure they reflect the urgency that we all feel on this issue. It is only then that this country will live up to its full potential. Thank you all for what you're doing. Thank you for having us out. We are very, very grateful. Gracias. Nos vemos. Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for being out here and wearing that Beto hat. Hey! Oh my gosh, you're right in front of me and I didn't see you. Thanks for coming out.
Our sister was a big supporter since Houston. Gotta get out.
Here, I'll take it.